Buenas, aquí estamos en el Foro Global de Funglode. Aquí estamos con el señor Chris Moffett, que es un doctor en filosofía educativa en la Universidad de Columbia. Aquí le vamos a estar preguntando varias preguntas, opinando justamente de cuál será su participación dentro del foro. Mr. Chris, what is going to be your participation in the forum in and out of itself, or what information or topics are you going to hit?
Yeah, so the big picture is I want to talk about the relationship between AI and education. Obviously, AI has really, hit everyone's public awareness in the last couple of years, and now, one of the major use cases is in education. And so there's a lot of questions that come up in what it looks like to really think about the intersection of education and AI, right? And so I'd like to talk less about the particulars and more about like how we can think about what that relationship is, and how we can think about ways to approach AI going forward that are responsible and really thoughtful, so that it supports education rather than sort of distracting from educational practices.
Moffett, ¿qué significa para usted la arte de la inteligencia y qué significado tiene para usted individualmente?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first of all, it's just sort of play on the name artificial intelligence, right? And so I think we sort of take that for granted, and we just say AI and AI this and AI that. But what does it mean that it's artificial? And how are we supposed to think about that? Part of my background is in art education, so I think a lot about the aesthetics of things and art. And I think we oftentimes compartmentalize like things that are artful and creative and things that are technical. But one of the really interesting things about AI is it doesn't really play in those categories. It really crosses a lot of boundaries, right? So one of the first use cases that people used AI for was making images, right? But even beyond that, any technology is in some sense an art. Right? It's a set of techniques. It's a way of looking at the world. It's a way of seeing things differently. It's a way of imagining a future, right? We don't build technologies just to build them. We build them because we imagine the possibilities. And so I really want to highlight that sort of creative idea behind the technology and really challenge us to think about AI not just as a tool, but as something that really we can look at almost as if we were looking at an art object. Not to appreciate it, to say, oh, well, that's a really beautiful AI, but to really think, oh, well, what does that make me feel, and how can I relate to that, and what different ideas does it bring up?
¿Qué significa que usted usa el IA para dar una respuesta física, sensorial a educación, algo que parece completamente no digital?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, there's lots of ways you can mix it together, some better than others, right? And I think one of the things we have to realize is that education, since its beginnings, has really always been in relationship to different kinds of technologies, right? The first writing tablets were sort of a source for really thinking about educational practices. And ever since then, education has really been grappling with how do we think about the physicality of things, right? So you're right, there's a real kinds of hands-on quality to education. And then when we think of the digital, we oftentimes think of something else other than hands-on, right? It's some kind of virtual place. But what I want to emphasize is the digital is also hands-on. In fact, it's one of the things we get our hands on most frequently. Oftentimes we're sliding our finger on the glass of our phones or something like that. But it's an interaction, it's a physical interaction, and it asks us to imagine different kinds of spaces, different kinds of relation. It changes our gestures, it changes how we think about how we relate to the world around us. And so the digital is not the opposite of a material, it's actually a quite material thing.
Like an expansion. Like an expansion.
Yeah. In a way, you could think that what the real innovation of computers and the digital is it took the capacity to think about technical objects, and it created a kind of object for emulating other tools, other objects, right? A computer does a lot of things. Your phone does a lot of things. It's not really a phone anymore. We hardly call anybody on it anymore. We use it to text. We use it as a typewriter. We use it as a calculator, right? Exactly. It's like it has every little app is its own little tool, right? And so So it's really kind of emulating a different kind of way of relating to all these sort of things that we think of as being physical.
¿Cómo usted cree que esta manera de educación puede utilizarse en Latinoamérica, donde se conecta lo artístico con la inteligencia artificial?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of different ways in which we can really think about how this can go well. And I think part of the challenge is really trying to steer it in those directions, because like any tool, it's really only as good as what you use it for, right? And so I think, one of the ways in which AI has really kind of taken the world by storm is it seems to sort of take care of tasks very efficiently. And so obviously in education, if you don't want to do a task or something like that, it's like almost a knee-jerk reaction to think, oh, well, I'll just ask AI to do it for me, or AI will explain it, or write me something, or make a picture for me. But the more creative use of it is to really think of, well, what is specific about this tool, and how can we get it to do things that we haven't seen yet, right? And so instead of thinking, oh, okay, well, how can we use AI to support things we've already done, and sort of just copy other and sort of perform tasks we've already been doing in other ways? What can we use this tool for that would allow for new possibilities? And I think that really requires both students and teachers and administrators and sort of everyone involved to think, how do we explore? How do we experiment? How do we get our hands in there and sort of see what it can do?
¿Usted cree genuinamente que la IA puede utilizarse como una herramienta creativa o, a pesar de la definición que usted acaba de dar, algo más técnico y siempre será algo técnico?
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of different ways we can think about our relationship to AI, and I don't want to say that there's any one way to do things, but I do think the idea of collaborating with it is a useful one, as long as we keep in mind that every collaboration has its nuances, and we really have to be very aware of what everybody brings to the table, including ourselves and including these tools. And so, I think there's a lot of creative potential in really thinking about what does it look like to think with, or to generate with, or to write with, or to make images with some tool that in some sense has a kind of weird mind of its own, right? It's not the same kind of practice that you would have if you were working with even like digital tools like a Photoshop or a photo manipulation software or something like that, where you can very precisely sort of emulate older technologies, right? The Photoshop and photo emulation are based on the idea of manipulating photographs or manipulating painting, right? But with AI, it's a different kind of interface, right? We don't have that sort of hands-on tool experience in the same kind of way. So we have to think about, well, what does that collaboration look like? What does it look like to collaborate with a technical tool that you can't tell it exactly what you want, right? You can try. And in fact, oftentimes really interesting things come when you get really specific with AI. But even then, it's going to give you something
that it wants.
And it's going to surprise you. And I think, part of that collaboration is being able to say, oh, okay, well, maybe that's not what I was looking for. Let's see if we can take it in a different direction. Or, oh, wow, I didn't even think of that. Let's see where that goes. But I think, the real challenge creatively is to always be asking questions. AI is almost too efficient at sort of seeming creative. You can ask it to spit out an image and it'll give you a realistic looking image in, a matter of seconds. And you think, wow, that's something. But is that the image you were looking for? Or what does that image say to you? And how do we have a conversation about that? That's a much sort of deeper kind of collaborative process.
Desde su perspectiva de filosofía, ¿usted considera que implementando la IA o cómo se implementaría la IA en el sistema educativo aquí en Latinoamérica o más específicamente República Dominicana?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, one of the things I really want to emphasize is that these tools have grand ambitions, right? That they're sort of global tools, and clearly we've seen the impact of AI has a kind of global reach already, just in a matter of a very short amount of time. And I think the people who are sort of developing these tools are obviously thinking at that sort of large global level. But at the same time, I think it's all the more critical that we really think about the specificity of how it's implemented at the local level, right? And realize that just because a a tool is sort of a general tool doesn't mean that you can't use it for specific purposes. And in fact, with a tool like AI, the devil really is in the details. It really matters how you use it and what are the conditions in which you're using it in. What's the educational system? What are the educational goals? What's the social political ambition that you have for introducing students to these tools, right? All these things are very important. And I think these are going to be questions that we're going to be wrestling with for decades to come. Is like, what does it look like to really think responsibly about local uses of these technologies, and how can they speak to our very real immediate concerns, right? And I think this is where the real power of it actually lies, is because it's very flexible, and we can really think about different AIs, and we can think about AIs that sort of speak to each one of our own individual needs, but also our kind of collective social needs that are specific to our condition. Instead of just saying, oh, okay, well, this tool does the same thing everywhere, right? We can say, oh, well, what can we use it for here? How does it serve our vision of what life looks like here?
En ese mismo orden, ¿usted diría que la IA, dependiendo del uso que se le dé, se puede implementar no solamente para darle una experiencia educativa no solamente a los profesores, sino a los estudiantes, sino también puede ser implementada en la sociedad para que le dé otro nivel de inmersión a la tecnología?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's certainly possible. But again, it really requires us to be very conscientious and thoughtful about what that looks like, and really thinking about a lot of different things. And I think, on the one hand, AI is a great tool for emulating a lot of different things, and so we can create interesting experiences. But I think there's also lots of other ways to create experiences, and I think I really would worry if we thought, well, experience is just going to get captured by AI, and so everything is going to get filtered through some kind of AI experience. Before we stop and say, well, actually, is that the experience that we want, and are there other ways to give this experience, right? And so, I think this is particularly important at the local level to say, look, like, how does this serve our students? Like, is it giving them richer experiences, or is it giving them a simulation of richer experiences? And I think there's a real fine line there that we have to get better at sort of distinguishing, and say, like, how do we know what the experience of the students is, and how are we involving them in crafting their own experiences and thinking about its possibilities? I mean, one really amazing thing that happens with a lot of tools that sort of become sort of widely available and powerful is that they can really level the playing field, right? We can get laptops into a lot of people's hands now that before would have been prohibitive, right? And that itself can be a game-changing experience. But just because you have the laptop doesn't mean
that you have the technology
that you
or the
solved
understanding.
It. And all too often, actually, quite the opposite happens. Like, it winds up being a way to sort of sell a bunch of laptops and then slap an experience on it, and then we call it education and think. So I think we really have to be deliberate about the kinds of experiences that we want to create with these things, and really think about, okay, is this preparing people for participation in an economic sense? Is it opening up opportunities for them? But also, is it giving them the tools to think about and decide the directions of their own lives, right? And instead of it being sort of dictated by the technologies themselves.
Si usted pudiera darle consejo específicamente a esos profesores que quieren aprender más de la IA para darle una mejor experiencia a sus estudiantes y que no solamente lo usen como una herramienta para hacer tareas, ¿cómo usted lo hiciera o qué consejo le daría?
Yeah. I mean, I think the first thing is actually true of both students and teachers, which is that it's really important to get over that first hump of thinking, oh, well, this can just take some of my work off my plate, which in today's age, that's actually a huge thing, because we increasingly have so much work. A lot of it feels like sort of busy work. And so I think that's one of the things that AI is sort of looked to for. But we really have to think beyond that. It's like, okay, not how can AI spit out a lesson plan for me so that I don't have to worry about it and I can just go teach. But how can how can I work with these tools in order to really think about what I want a lesson plan to do and what I could actually do with this tool that I couldn't do otherwise, right? And this comes back to the kind of sort of collaborative sort of relationship we can have with AI. But it's really important to foster that relationship and not just say, AI, take care of this for me. And the other thing I would say is that part of that means that we also have to get beyond our sort of first reactions to AI. And everyone has a different sort of set of assumptions and biases around AI for many different reasons. Some people are very skeptical or tech phobic or worried about giving control over, and all those things are very real and important concerns.
The grandma effect.
Yeah, exactly. And other people are like, okay, great, I'm going to do it. This is like they're on it. They're early adopters. They really want to see what they can do and really have big hopes and dreams for how AI is going to revolutionize their teaching. And interestingly, I co-taught an AI lab for educators this last winter at Teachers College, and we had teachers from around the world come together and play with AI and really get their hands dirty and really try things out and see what they can do with it. And we had that full range of biases coming in. And what we found afterwards is that actually the people who came in really worried actually came in left feeling a little bit more confident, feeling like, oh, actually, well, I can imagine how this could go, and I can really think about what this could look like. And those who came in really super enthusiastic and gung-ho actually left a little bit more wary and cautious, being like, oh, well, actually, there's a lot of weirdness that happens with AI, and it's not actually the sort of Band-Aid that's going to fix everything right out of the gate. And so I think, regardless of how you're coming into it, I think we really, as teachers, have to sort of spend the time to really get to know and become familiar with the tools, not in order to master them, but to see, like, what can it do? What can it do? What can I rely on it for? What can't I rely on it for? Like, that's really the most important thing. And until you really get some experience under your belt, it's really hard to make those assessments.
¿Qué tipo de disciplina intercomunitaria o interlazada tuviera que tener un artista, un educador, un tecnologista para utilizar de manera efectiva o más urgente en consiguiendo el futuro, utilizando el balance del AI entre la lógica y la emoción?
I mean, that's a great question. I mean, I think the first thing I would say is it's important to experiment with it without feeling like you need it to do a specific outcome. And this is even more important when you're sort of using it within your domain, because that's the domain you already know, and that's actually the domain where it's much more important for you to really drive things and use your own sort of understanding to make assessments, right? Because one of the things that AI is famous for is hallucinating and for sounding a little bit right, but actually
Can you explain what that is?
Well, I mean, this is a big question, right? It's actually a huge philosophical question. What does it mean for a technical digital object to be hallucinating or fantasizing? And I think, on the one hand, I think it's actually not as magical as we think. It's a little bit like what we do all the time. We start out a sentence and then we get a little bit sidetracked and sort of meander our way through it, right? It's a very common thing. And we also hold all kinds of things to be true that maybe aren't true, right? It's just part of being human. And AI, it turns out, because it trained on human data, sort of behaves that way a little bit. And so, but I think at its root, it really is just an expression of AI sort of trying to approximate things, but it doesn't actually have any way to access the thing itself, right? And so it's always guessing. And you could say, oh, well, that's a horrible thing. I don't want my tools to be just guessing at things. But actually, guessing is a very powerful tool as long as you understand that that's what it is. It's guessing. And you'll see on, even on ChatGPT, it's like it comes with a little warning, which is like, for important things, you might want to check this. And I would say for all things, you might want to just assume that it's a little bit funny.
That should be the message.
Yeah.
That's super interesting that you say that, because that gives in and out of itself the question of how much are people really relying on AI, and what we've talked about during this interview, that we can not only use it to do our simple task or heavy work, but how can we really use it to leap forward in education, leap forward in Latin America, and leap forward in actually using it to construct better humans. So I think that's a way that it should go. I think that's the way it should kind of move. I don't know what your thoughts about that.
Yeah, well, that makes me think too. It's like it's really important to be able to know what it is that you're looking for and how you want that interaction to go. And so if you're looking for technical information, hallucinations matter a lot, right? If you're looking for the correct answer, it really matters a lot. And because AI can oftentimes, because it emulates a sort of confidence, oftentimes it can be really misleading, and will even sort of reverse itself from moment to moment, but with the utmost confidence, right? And so if you're looking for something that's very important and information based, it's important to know that that's the mode you're in and the ways in which you're going to verify and check to make sure that you're getting what you need out of it. If you're looking for something more generative, or you're actually looking for something unusual, or something to really think about, to your point about sort of interdisciplinary connections, if you're looking for something outside of what you would normally kind of think of, then it's important to know that that's the mode you're engaging in as well. Like it's a really interesting way to kind of just come up with things that maybe you wouldn't have thought of on your own. But again, then once you come up with once sort of the collaboration sort of begins to emerge these things, it's also your responsibility to think about, what do we do with this creative sort of possibility?
I thank you so much for being with us here with Funglode, with Multimedia Group, and we appreciate you being here. I'm going to give you a quick outro. Bueno, aquí acabamos de terminar con el doctor Chris Moffett, un investigador en Colombia, en the Teachers College. Realmente ha sido con mucha información aquí en el Foro Global de IA de Funglode. Muchísimas gracias.